Close your eyes and let the noise of the present slowly fade away. You are safe, you are warm, and you are about to drift into a different world, a world shaped long before your own. This is not a story of heroes or battles, nor of sudden excitement. Instead, it is a gentle journey through time, where the rhythm of history flows slowly, like a quiet river winding through the night. Tonight, we travel to the lands of the ancient Maya. Imagine dense forests stretching endlessly in every direction. The air is heavy with warmth, and even in the darkness, you can sense the hum of life all around you: crickets, distant birds, and the faint rustle of leaves stirred by unseen creatures. Among these forests, small villages rise quietly, built of wood and thatch, their paths soft with earth, their homes humble and practical. It is here, not in the grand temples or the towering pyramids, but in these ordinary villages, that the majority of Maya people lived their lives. Their days were marked not by the extraordinary, but by the ordinary: work, repetition, duty, the rhythm of cultivating maize, the endless tending of crops, the carrying of water, the preparing of simple meals. Tasks that returned every day, without fail, shaping lives as predictably as the rising and setting of the sun. It is this rhythm we will enter, a rhythm both exhausting and strangely steady, and as we do, you may find the quiet familiarity of their days mirrors the calm you seek, now the calm that helps you drift deeper into rest. But the Maya world was not only toil. It was also belief, ritual, and a constant awareness of the unseen. The stars above were studied carefully. The seasons were mapped with precision. The gods were honored in ceremonies that gave meaning to the endless cycles of work. Behind every harvest, behind every breath, there was the sense of living in a world balanced delicately between human effort and divine will. Over the course of this night's journey, we will wander through 4 different doorways of their history. First, we will walk with the ordinary people, experiencing the texture of their days, their struggles, and their perseverance. Then, we will turn toward the lives of leaders, moments of decision, and the figures who shaped their communities. After that, we will drift into the mysteries still hidden in the forest's ruins, rituals and unanswered questions that continue to echo through time. Finally, we will rise into the contrasting world of the elite, whose existence was marked not by survival, but by ceremony, privilege, and distance from the burdens of daily labor. Each segment will move slowly, without urgency. Each detail will unfold gently, like a soft curtain being drawn aside. The sounds, the textures, the routines, all of them will come to you steadily, never rushing, always inviting you to sink deeper into calm. And if your eyes grow heavy as the story flows, that is as it should be. History is not only a record of what once was, it is also a lullaby, a reminder that countless lives have already been lived, countless days already endured, and that tonight, you do not need to do anything except rest. Picture yourself walking a narrow dirt path leading into a Maya village. The path is edged by tall grasses, their tips brushing lightly against your skin. You feel the weight of the air, moist and warm, clinging gently around you. As you enter the village, you notice the faint smoke of cooking fires drifting slowly upward into the darkening sky. The homes are simple, but they carry the marks of care-woven mats, clay vessels, and the smell of maize roasting on stone. It is a world at once unfamiliar and deeply human. This is where our story begins. Not in the clamor of grand temples or the shouts of warriors, but in the quiet persistence of daily life, in the steady pulse of work, belief, and survival. A world that may seem distant, yet also strangely close, because at its heart are the same cycles that shape all human existence: waking, working, eating, resting. Allow yourself to sink into this rhythm. Let the slow unfolding of their days soothe you. Let the weight of their history cradle your thoughts. Tonight, the ancient Maya will guide you not into urgency or excitement, but into calm, into repetition, and, if you wish, into sleep. Imagine the first light of morning in a small Maya village, a slow, warm glow seeping through palm-thatched roofs and the woven walls of homes made from sticks and clay. You wake on a reed mat that smells faintly of smoke and earth. The floor beneath is packed soil. Your feet know its contours. The air is already humid and slightly heavy, clinging to skin as if urging stillness. Around you, the forest breathes continuously. Insect hums, frogs calling, birds calling from high in the canopy. Silence is not an option here. Sound is a constant companion, a soft, tireless chorus. You rise slowly and step outside. Huts cluster loosely around an open yard where tools and pots are kept. Clay jars rest near doorways. A grinding stone sits where it has always sat, its surface smoothed by generations of hands. Women coax embers into flame. The smoke moves slowly, a ribbon that ties each household to the next. Men shoulder digging sticks and stone blades, walking along narrow paths cut through undergrowth toward the milpa, the field where maize the village's center will be tended. Water is the first task. You carry a heavy jar to a nearby cenote or stream, balancing its weight on your hip or head. The path is uneven, worn by many feet. Roots and stones press into your soles. Water, once poured, is used for cooking, for washing, for offering. Small tokens cornmeal or a flourer, sometimes left at the water's edge as a quiet thank you. The act of fetching water is both ordinary and sacred. The milpa is a patchwork cut from the forest, cleared, burned, planted, tended. Tools are simple and worn. Wooden handles with sharpened stone, a digging stick smoothed by decades of use. You bend, plant, weed, and lift in repeated motions. Sweat gathers on the skin. The sun climbs and presses downward. The work is patient and steady. Every stalk of maize is a small triumph. Every bean vine a careful achievement. Back at the household, maize is transformed. On a heavy stone, kernels are rubbed and ground into masa. The sounds scrape, press, creating a rhythm as reliable as breath. The masa is shaped into tortillas or wrapped into tamales and set by the fire. Meals are simple and sustaining. Tortillas, beans, squash, occasional fruit or fish. Flavor is spare. Sustenance is the purpose. Eating is practical, communal, and repeated. Clothing is made by hand. Cotton is spun and woven on backstrap looms. The loom's pull is a low, steady tug thread, crossing thread, pattern after pattern. Hoop piles and loincloths bear familiar motifs. Each design names a family, a place, a small identity. Weaving occupies hands and mind, a repetitive craft that soothes even as it supplies. Children learn by imitation. Small hands carry water in tiny gourds, chase away pests from the garden, and practice with miniature tools. They mimic the grinding motion, the weaving rhythm, the careful tending of seedlings. Play and instruction are braided together. Joy is brief but woven into everyday practice. Animals are nearby chickens, scratching in the dust. Dogs dozing in shade, the occasional small pig or turkey kept for special days. Their presence is practical. They provide eggs, meat sometimes, and a connection to the wild beyond the clearing. Flocks and animals are part of the village pulse, never loud, always useful. Hygiene is practical and repeated. Hands are washed at dawn and before meals. Faces are rinsed in cool stream water. Small rituals accompany work. Lips are moistened with plant resins. Hair is braided and oiled, and wounds, when they appear, are tended with poultices made from local herbs. There is no illusion of comfort, but there is care. Markets do not bustle with exotic goods. They arrive as small gatherings when traders pass along trails. A woven cloth here, a shard of polished obsidian there, these are treats that are traded for salt, cloth, or pottery. A trader's arrival opens a day of quiet exchange. Goods are swapped. Stories are told. News travels a little farther than usual. Rituals are woven into daily life. Smoke from burned copal drifts during planting or harvest ceremonies. An elder may sprinkle water on a heap of seeds, or chant a measured invocation to encourage rain. These acts are not spectacle, but slow weaving. They steady the community's mind and mark time. Belief and practice sit softly alongside labor. As afternoon cools, the day returns to its steady motions. Tools are cleaned, roofs inspected for leaks, broken pottery mended with careful lips and hands. The village hum narrows to household sounds. The scrape of stone on stone, the murmur of hushed voices, the flicker of flames. Night arrives with the chorus amplified, frogs louder, insects thick in sound, and the sky releasing a few bright stars through the canopy. Mats are spread, and bodies grow heavy with work. Conversation dwindles. Stories told at low volume recall planting cycles and the names of ancestors. Sleep comes not from silence, but from exhaustion and routine. The world outside continues its song, but inside the hut, slow breath marks another night survived. Seasons turn and fold the year like pages. The wet months arrive with a soft insistence, the forest answering with 1,000 small exhalations as rain runs down leaves and into the soil. The dry months follow with a careful thinness in which every jar of grain is counted. Households keep small stores, bundles of dried maize tucked beneath eaves, clay pots sealed with woven lids, sacks of beans tied and suspended from rafters. These caches are watched with quiet diligence. A mat laid down to inspect for damp, a hand feeling the weight of a jar, a whispered plan to divide a little more carefully until the rains return. Health is tended in the round of daily life. Fevers are cooled with wet cloths from the stream. Plant teas are brewed in measured pinches. Midwives move through the village with steady steps, offering guidance at births and knowing when rest is needed. A child's cough is met with poultices and songs. An elder's aching joints are warmed by massage. When death comes, the rites are quiet, washing, wrapping, and the naming of the departed until story holds them. There are small mercies in the monotony. A neighbor bringing seeds, a new palm mat woven from palm, a ripe tamarind found low in a branch, soft notes that color an unvaried day. Crafts continue in the quiet, pottery dried in the sun, baskets braided in repeating loops, cords twisted into useful strength. Each object is made by hands that repeat motions until the motion itself becomes a kind of lullaby. When storms sweep through, preparations are unhurried but exact. Roofs are bound tighter, jars are moved higher, channels cleared so water will pass without undermining walls. The response is practiced routine, small coordinated acts that restore balance. Then the work resumes with unremarkable steadiness. Evening rituals are soft and patient. Copal smoke rises in a slow column as an offering softly. An elder might chant a few lines that name the moon or the planting time. These practices are not dramatic. They are connective, folding the present into an older, measured understanding of time. Let these images settle like dust on a reed mat. The grinding stones scrape. The pull of a loom, a child's quiet hum. The measured offering at water's edge. Let your breath find that gentle rhythm, slow, repeated, reliable. The village's sameness becomes a soft architecture that holds everything together, and now it may hold you. Breathe in the pattern of daily life, and allow it to guide you toward rest. As the morning light stretches further across the village, the forest around the small Maya settlement begins to stir more insistently. The air is heavy, humid with dew lingering on leaves, carrying the soft scent of wet earth. Every sound is layered, the low hum of insects, the occasional call of a bird, the rustle of palm leaves as a faint breeze weaves through the thatched roofs. The village itself is not yet fully awake, but subtle movements mark the beginning of activity. Tools scrape against stone, small feet shuffle across packed soil, and the soft murmur of voices blends with the constant hum of nature. Within one hut, Exgel, a woman of middle years, stretches slowly. Her back aches faintly from yesterday's work, yet her movements are deliberate and familiar. She kneels beside a small child sleeping on a woven reed mat, smoothing the bundle of cloth that serves as blanket and pillow. Her fingers are rough from years of grinding maize, but they move with gentle precision as she adjusts the child's position. She reaches for her cotton hoopil, faded to a soft, familiar color, and wraps it around her body. This garment is more than clothing. It is a map of her life, each thread a record of daily care and attention. Exgel's first task is the grinding stone, the metate that has served her household for generations. She sets a handful of dried maize kernels onto its cool, warm surface. Pressing the mono into motion, she begins the slow, rhythmic grinding. Press, slide, press. The soft scraping sound fills the hut like a quiet song. It is repetitive, meditative, and reassuring, a steady measure of time itself. Each rotation of the stone is mirrored by the subtle movement of her shoulders, arms, and back, muscles remembering their shape and purpose. For Exgel, this daily motion is both labor and meditation, a deliberate, soothing rhythm that structures the day. Outside, the air is already thick and warm. The forest hums continuously, a background orchestra for every household. The scent of damp earth mixes with the sweet aroma of palm and the faint smoke of morning fires. Small animals stir, chickens scratching in the dirt, dogs stretching lazily, and occasionally a turkey clucking softly. Every sound is part of the daily rhythm, part of the structure that guides the villager's steps. Weather is a constant companion, shaping life in subtle but essential ways. Today the sky is a pale haze. The sun is gentle, yet the promise of heat presses on the skin. Villagers read the clouds and the wind, knowing when to tend fields quickly, when to store seeds carefully, when to prepare for the wet season. The forest and the sky converse in a language understood by practice and attention. Rain is both gift and challenge. It nourishes crops, but also transforms paths into slick obstacles, thickens the smoke of hearths, and presses moisture into the walls of huts. Drought is equally demanding, prompting careful rationing of stored maize, measured servings, and unhurried calculations that stretch across days and weeks. Xgel moves with deliberate attention to the sequence of her tasks: grind maize, knead dough, shape tortillas, tend to the child, repair a woven basket, check the storage jars for moisture. Each action is small, practical, and necessary. Her fingers have memorized the feel of the tools. Her back and arms respond without conscious thought. Even a brief pause, a moment to adjust the fire or straighten a jar, is a chance to notice the familiar world around her. The faint gleam of a clay pot, the curve of a leaf in the sun, the whisper of wind through the hut's cracks. Weaving occupies a quiet corner of the day. Xgel unrolls her backstrap loom, securing it to the post and to her own body. Each thread pulled, each pass over and under, is part of a pattern repeated countless times over her life. Patterns are not mere decoration. They are markers of identity, of family, of lineage. Her hands know the rhythm intimately. Pull, tighten, release, adjust. Each movement is slow, deliberate, and comforting. Even when the sun climbs high and heat presses down, the loom offers a stable rhythm, a continuous measure of productivity and calm. Food preparation follows its own slow course. Maize is nixtamalized, soaked, heated with ash, rinsed carefully, then ground. The process is laborious, requiring patience and attention. A slight miscalculation, too much water or too little ash, could compromise the batch. Xgel and the other women watch the texture and feel the kernels between their fingers. The aroma of freshly ground masa fills the hut with warmth, signaling sustenance and care. Tortillas are cooked slowly on clay griddles. Tamales are wrapped meticulously, leaves folded to contain the soft, spiced maize within. Children watch quietly, absorbing the process as part of their own education. Their fingers occasionally brushing flour from the stone. Bodies bear the weight of these routines. Shoulders are strong, backs adapted to bending over the grinding stone. Hands calloused from repeated tasks, feet toughened by uneven paths. Small aches mark the passage of days, a constant companion, never dramatic but persistent. Even minor illness is met with attention. Herbal teas brewed, compresses applied, rest beside the hearth. Each remedy is familiar, part of the soft ritual of care. Death, when it comes, is handled with quiet, dignity, washed, wrapped, and remembered in story. The social fabric of the village intertwines with labor. Women share weaving tips, grinding stone space, and brief conversations. Men coordinate planting and field work, exchanging advice on which plots need more attention. Children follow, imitate, and learn. Xgel watches Kin, a boy of 8, carrying a tiny gourd to fetch water, mimicking the movements of adults. He observes, learns, absorbs the rhythm of tasks, and slowly folds into the long repetition that structures the village. As the sun climbs higher, heat presses gently, shaping work pace. Paths shimmer with moisture. Leaves drip faintly. The forest hum grows dense. Xgel checks the maize in storage jars, gently shaking a clay vessel to test the contents. She notes the condition of woven baskets, the alignment of drying tamales. Small adjustments are made. A jar repositioned, a cloth draped over a basket to shield it from rain. Every act is deliberate, each small motion contributing to survival and order. Evening draws a slow curtain over the village. The sun dips low, shadows lengthen, fires are rekindled, and the smell of roasted maize, beans, and squash fills the air. Exgel sits with the child at her side, the small body warm against hers. She listens to the forest chorus frogs, insects, distant calls, and lets the rhythm settle into her bones. She recalls the day's work, noting small successes and gentle failures alike. Each task, each routine, forms the invisible architecture of survival. The night rituals are subtle but sacred. Copal smoke curls slowly, incense-like, through the hut, carrying prayers for fertility, rain, and protection. Exgel joins the chant softly, her voice low, matching the measured, gentle beat of time. Children are guided to mats for sleep, blankets arranged carefully, small hands tucked under their chins. Adults linger, finishing minor repairs, counting seeds, preparing tools for tomorrow. There is no hurry, no loud celebrational, the deliberate, reassuring repetition of work, care, and vigilance. Through these hours, life is neither fast nor sudden. Each action is small, precise, necessary. Grinding, weaving, tending, preparing, observing all form a continuous rhythm. The body adapts to the motions, the mind absorbs the repeated patterns, and even the youngest, like Cain, learns the soft music of daily life. The forest, the village, the tools, the hands all pulse together in unhurried harmony. As darkness deepens, Exgel finally rests. The grinding stone remains in its place. The loom awaits morning. The jars of maize hum softly with contained promise. The air is thick with smoke and earth, with warmth and calm. Breath slows. Eyes grow heavy. The repetition, the rhythm, the steady patterns of the village life wrap gently around all who dwell here. They cradle bodies, they fold minds into soft awareness, and they invite a long, quiet sleep. As the afternoon stretches lazily across the village, the sunlight filters through the canopy, dappling the earth with patches of gentle gold. Cain, a boy of 8 summers, follows the slow rhythm of Exgel's hands. He carries a tiny gourd filled with water, careful to keep it balanced, feeling the weight shift with every step. His small feet press into the packed soil of the path, and he listens to the soft scrape of a grinding stone, the low hum of a distant fire, and the faint creak of a backstrap looms somewhere nearby. Each sound is a guide, a marker of where he is in the day's unfolding. Cain observes his mother and the other women as they prepare food. They grind maize on the metate, knead it into dough, and shape it into tortillas and tamales with rhythmic precision. Their hands are steady, fingers marked with flour, calluses, and years of repetition. The scent of freshly ground corn drifts through the hut, earthy, warm, and gentle. Meals are not moments of excitement, but of continuity, each bite a reinforcement of life's daily patterns. Cain leans against a post, watching the repetition, the press, the slide. The press again and begins to understand that survival is a rhythm, a cycle, not a series of dramatic acts. Water is drawn from the nearby, poured carefully into clay jars, and set aside for cooking or washing. Cain helps, imitating Exgel's careful steps, noting the soft rippling sound as water fills the vessel, the cool touch against his hands. The act is ordinary, but it carries a quiet importance. Each container filled, each measurement made, is part of the invisible scaffolding that holds the household together. The child learns that diligence and attentiveness are as vital as strength. The afternoon heat presses gently. coaxing beads of sweat along foreheads and necks. But work continues. Exchel moves to inspect the small garden plots, checking the beans climbing wooden poles, the squash leaves that shade the soil, the maize stalks that sway slightly in the wind. Every plant is accounted for, a leaf bent back to catch sunlight, a pest gently removed, the soil smoothed to encourage growth. Kayan shadows her movements, feeling the texture of leaves, the grain of the soil, and the subtle weight of responsibility that accompanies tending a living patch of earth. Even the smallest tasks carry meaning. Clay jars are moved to higher shelves. Woven baskets adjusted to protect their contents from sun or rain. Tiny tools sharpened or repaired. Excel's fingers know the right tension of a knot, the precise angle to wedge a stick in the earth. Each small act is repeated enough times that it becomes second nature, a quiet meditation disguised as labor. Kayan begins to internalize these gestures, understanding their cumulative effect. Survival, care, and continuity are built from countless small attentions. The forest around the village hums with its own steady rhythm. Chickens scratch quietly, dogs stretch and yawn, and the occasional turkey clucks softly. Birds move from tree to tree, unseen yet heard, calling in small, measured bursts. The wind rustles through palms and leafy canopies, brushing against the walls of huts, carrying with it faint scents of earth, pollen, and smoke. The village exists in a constant, measured dialogue with the natural world. Each task, each step, each breath is part of this quiet conversation. Children learn through imitation and gentle guidance. Kayan is shown how to rotate stored maize to prevent spoilage, how to sort kernels for planting, how to handle fragile clay jars without cracking them. His small hands mimic the adults, sometimes fumbling, sometimes precise. Each repetition reinforces skill and patience. There is no rush, no emphasis on speed. The lessons are imparted in soft cadence, like a slow chant, embedding the rhythm of care and attentiveness deep into memory. Meals come and go with their own measured pace. Breakfast is often a simple tortilla warmed on a stone. Midday might bring a modest stew of beans and squash if ingredients permit. Evening is a communal meal, gathered around the fire, hands moving methodically to distribute food, eyes following the smoke as it rises, ears attuned to the soft murmur of conversation. Taste is familiar, comforting, and repetitive, never startling, always sustaining. Food is memory as much as nourishment, a slow, tactile reassurance that the day has been lived fully and steadily, even as the afternoon wanes. Exchel continues to move among her household's small universe of needs. She mends a torn basket, inspects the drying leaves of wrapped tamales, and adjusts the coverings of stored maize. Each gesture is deliberate, careful, and quietly essential. A neighbor passes by with a basket of herbs. They exchange a few words, a brief smile, a small acknowledgement of mutual reliance. These minor interactions are as much a part of life as grinding, kneading, and weaving. They maintain social cohesion, silently ensuring that each household thrives within the village network. Illness and injury, when they appear, are met with a composed vigilance. A mild fever will be treated with a wet cloth or herbal tea. Cuts and bruises are addressed with poultices, careful washes, and gentle hands. Midwives move through the village with unobtrusive expertise, quietly guiding births and attending to the sick. There is no drama in these interventions, only steady, repeated attention that reassures both patient and observer. Kayan notices, absorbs, and internalizes these practices, understanding that care is often quiet, never ostentatious, but infinitely vital as evening descends. Shadows lengthen and the village settles into a slower rhythm. The air cools slightly, the forest chorus intensifies, frogs croaking, insects trilling, leaves rustling with gentle persistence. Exchel prepares the household for night, placing mats for sleeping, wrapping the child carefully, lighting a small offering of copel. The smoke rises in a thin, steady column, carrying prayers and blessings that are both for protection and for continuity. The aroma is warm, comforting, and familiar, folding the family into the soft embrace of evening. Cain lies on his mat, eyes growing heavy, the rhythm of the day's labor echoing in his mind. He recalls the grinding stones scrape, the gentle pull of the loom, the careful tending of the garden, the measured hand of his mother as she distributes food. These repeated, ordinary acts create a deep, unspoken structure to life, a rhythm of survival, care, and quiet continuity. The subtle pressures of scarcity judged in careful rotations of maize. The rationing of water, the tending of the smallest plant form a gentle tension, always present but never urgent enough to disturb the calm. The day closes with the knowledge that repetition is security. Each gesture, each careful act, each attentive glance ensures continuity. The tools lie in their places, the jars hold their maize, the mats await the body's weight. Breath slows, limbs relax. The patterns of labor, care, and observation fold gently around the family, wrapping them in a steady, calming rhythm. Cain drifts toward sleep, cradled by the invisible architecture of work and routine, lulled by the gentle persistence of everyday life, the quiet pulse of a Maya village, and the soft, repetitive music of survival. The boy who would one day be called Pakol the Great was born in the Maya city of Palenque, surrounded not by thunderous events or great fanfare, but by the ordinary, quiet rhythms of daily life that had unfolded in that city for generations. When Cainich Genob Pakel came into the world in 603 CE, he was simply a child within a household cradled, wrapped, and soothed much as any other baby in the city. The carved stones and pyramids that now carry his name were not yet part of his story. Instead, his first world was the sound of lullabies, the creak of wooden beams, and the scent of burning copal drifting lazily through his family's home as he grew. His early days were shaped not by sudden bursts of drama, but by steady instruction and gentle observation. He watched elders grinding maize on stone, priests tracing glyphs onto bark paper, artisans painting pottery with deliberate strokes. These sights imprinted themselves onto his young mind, not as extraordinary acts, but as the constant background of life in Palenque. Even the palace, what it would later become, was then simply a set of structures marked by workers moving stone, shaping wood, adjusting thatch, and layering plaster. To young Pakal, it was less a monument of grandeur than a collection of sounds and textures. Stone being struck, plaster smooths, reeds swaying in the breeze. Life in the royal household was not without its rituals. He was bathed in cool water drawn from nearby streams, clothed in woven cotton, and adorned with small jade beads that marked his noble status. Yet even these markers of distinction were bound up in repetition and calm. The donning of garments, the braiding of hair, the presentation of food at set times each, followed a rhythm, a structure that reassured rather than overwhelmed. For the boy, these patterns formed a cocoon of predictability. When Pakal was 12 years old, Palenque faced political upheavals, rivalries, and shifting alliances. Yet even in times of turmoil, life retained its layers of repetition. Councils met at regular intervals. Offerings were made with measured chants. The people continued to grind maize, weave cloth, and carry water. Amid the turbulence of politics, Pakal absorbed the lesson that power itself was not about sudden flashes of control, but about sustaining continuity, ensuring that rituals were performed, that temples were repaired, that the calendar's progression was honored without interruption. Ascending to leadership at just 12, he was thrust into responsibilities that might have seemed daunting. But his approach, even then, was methodical. He listened to advisors in quiet halls, his gaze steady, his responses unhurried. He learned to judge the tone of a voice, the weight of a silence, the careful arrangement of offerings before the gods. Leadership, he discovered, was less about commanding in fiery declarations and more about ensuring the gentle, uninterrupted flow of life through the city, that fields were tended, that rituals were observed, that artisans continued their craft as years stretched on. Pakal became a man whose life was interwoven with the steady pulse of Palenque's survival. He walked slowly through courtyards, greeting people with deliberate nods. He sat in council chambers, listening to disputes, weighing each side with the patience of someone who understood that the city's health lay not in haste but in careful balance. His reign extended for decades, yet each day, from dawn until dusk, was shaped by repeated gestures, rising at first light, receiving offerings, walking the palace grounds, listening to chants in the temple, and retiring at night under the same stars that watched over every farmer, artisan, and child of Palenque. His projects, grand temples, and the palace expansions were not sudden inspirations, but long drawn-out endeavors. Workers chiseled stone for years, their steady tapping becoming the soundtrack of his rule. Plaster was applied and reapplied, walls smoothed, glyphs carved with patience, stairways adjusted stone by stone. Pakal's vision was realized not in moments of dramatic unveiling, but in decades of cumulative effort, where each worker's repetitive labor slowly transformed Palenque into the city we know today. For him, greatness was measured in persistence, in ensuring that time itself left a trace through careful construction. Even his personal life followed a steady cadence. Meals of maize, beans, squash, and cacao marked the hours of his day. Ritual baths soothed the body after the weight of council meetings. He was adorned with jade and fine cloth, not in flamboyant bursts, but through careful, deliberate dressing. His marriages and children, too, were part of a greater rhythm of continuity, ensuring lineage, weaving new strands into the tapestry of Palenque's future. In the evenings, he would retreat into quiet spaces of the palace. The murmur of servants faded, the torches flickered, and the air filled with the faint scent of incense. In those moments, he could hear the distant calls of the forest, the croak of frogs, the hum of cicadas, the rustle of palm leaves. Even as king, he remained a man bound to the slow pulse of the natural world. His power threaded through the same cycles that shaped every Maya life. As Pakal aged, his steps grew slower, his body more fragile, but his dedication to rhythm and repetition never faltered. He continued to attend rituals, to observe offerings, to oversee the slow progression of construction. His reign lasted nearly 70 years, and in that long span, his presence became almost synonymous with continuity itself. Generations were born, grew old, and died under his rule, while he remained a steady figure, reminder that life, for all its hardships and occasional upheaval, was defined more by the quiet repetitions than by sudden storms. When at last he passed, the preparations for his burial echoed the same calm rhythms that had shaped his life. His body was placed within the temple of the inscriptions, adorned with jade, surrounded by glyphs that told his story. Yet even here, the process was slow, deliberate, and ritualized. Stones were placed carefully, incense burned in measured offerings, chants rose and fell like the breath of the city itself. His death, like his life, was woven into the fabric of slow continuity, and so, Pakal the Great remains not just a figure of history, but a reminder of how leadership, survival, and even greatness itself can be built from quiet repetition, from rhythms that soothe, from gestures that echo endlessly through time. To imagine his days is to imagine a world where power rests not on spectacle but on the steady beat of the calendar, the cycle of rituals, the measured steps of a man who lived, led, and endured calmly, patiently, and with the persistence of stone shaped over decades. The year was in the late 7th century. By then Kanich, Janob Pakal, who would rule Palenque for decades, had seen his city rise stone by stone into a place of enduring memory. Among the projects closest to his heart was a great temple, one that would not only honor the gods, but also carry his own story into the future. That temple, which we know today as the Temple of the Inscriptions, took shape slowly, patiently, as all great Maya works did through years of measured labor, repeated gestures, and countless hands moving in rhythm with time itself. The construction was no sudden eruption of energy. It unfolded across seasons. First came the preparation of the ground, workers clearing, leveling, arranging, marking lines in the soil where stone would rise. For days and weeks, the sound of wooden tools, the scrape of stone against stone, and the shuffle of bare feet filled the air. Each movement was simple lifting, carrying, setting down, but together they became a steady heartbeat. The temple rose, layer by layer, not in a rush, but in slow ascent, as if it too were subject to the same cycles that governed crops, rains, and stars. When the temple finally reached its form, it stood not as a monument of sudden triumph, but as the culmination of countless repetitions, chisels striking, plaster-smoothed glyphs carved in deliberate lines. The very walls of the structure carried within them the patient energy of generations. Every stone seemed to hold the memory of sweat, breath, and careful placement. For Pakal, this was not merely a building. It was a vessel for time, a place where his story would be inscribed in glyphs that future eyes might read. Long after the sounds of his city had faded, the day of dedication was chosen with care, aligned with the cycles of the calendar. Priests traced dates in codices, measuring the auspicious moments when ceremony would align with cosmic order. At dawn, the city stirred not with excitement, but with preparation. Fires were lit in hearths, filling the air with the warm smell of maize gruel. Women prepared tamales wrapped in leaves, while men arranged benches, mats, and offerings. The great temple awaited, its steps cool in the morning air, shadows stretching long across the plaza. Pakal himself moved slowly toward the temple. By this time in his life, he was already advanced in age, his body marked by years of ritual and rule. He wore garments of white cotton, embroidered with jade beads that caught the morning light. His headdress rose tall, not in flamboyance, but in solemn weta, symbol of continuity. Each step up the temple staircase was deliberate. Servants supported him gently, their hands steady, their pace unhurried. The crowd watched in silence, not with loud cheers, but with a reverent quiet, as though they too were part of the measured rhythm of the day. At the summit, the rituals began. Priests offered incense, the smoke rising in soft curls that wavered against the sky. The scent of copal filled the air, sweet and resinous, drifting slowly down the steps. Drums beat in steady intervals, not loud or frenzied, but deep and repetitive thum like the slow beating of a heart. Shell trumpets called out in long, sustained notes that echoed against the stone walls. Together, these sounds created an atmosphere not of spectacle but of immersion, where time itself seemed to stretch and soften. Pakal listened as chants rose, each phrase drawn out in repetition, each syllable carefully pronounced. Glyphs carved into the temple's walls mirrored the words, preserving them in stone. The ceremony wove together sound, sight, and scent in layers. The glimmer of jade against cotton, the sway of feathered fans, the smell of burning incense, the cadence of human voices repeating the names of gods, ancestors, and kings. Nothing was rushed. Each act followed another in a measured sequence, as if the entire city were caught in a shared meditation. The offerings were laid before the gods: food, cloth, jade, shells, and cacao. Each was placed with deliberate hands, accompanied by murmured words. The priests did not hurry. They moved as though each gesture carried the weight of centuries, and in truth, it did. The Maya believed that ritual connected the present to the deep past and to the unfolding future. To place an offering was to reaffirm continuity, to weave one more thread into the endless fabric of time. As the ceremony continued, Pakal sat upon a mat, his posture steady, his face calm. He was no longer just a man or a king, but a figure embodying the balance between human and divine. The temple that surrounded him was not simply a building of stone, but a stage upon which time itself played out in repetition. His presence, his patience, and his measured breaths were part of the ritual as much as the chants and offerings. Hours passed, but there was no sense of haste. The day unfolded like the slow turning of the earth itself. The sun moved across the sky, shadows shifted, incense burned to ash, and drums continued their steady rhythm. For the people of Palenque, this was not a performance, but a reaffirmation of their world's order. Each sound, each gesture, each repeated phrase reminded them that their lives were part of cycles larger than themselves. By dusk, when the ceremonies began to close, the temple stood not only as stone and mortar, but as a vessel of meaning. The dedication was complete, and with it, Pakal's reign had etched itself deeper into the history of Palenque. The glyphs on the walls told of his lineage, his achievements, his role in maintaining the balance of the cosmos. Yet even these inscriptions were carved with the same calm precision that marked every other act of the day as the last light of the sun touched the temple's upper stones. Torches were lit, their glow flickered softly, reflecting in jade ornaments and shimmering across plastered walls. The people began to disperse slowly, walking back through streets where the sounds of daily life resumed. The grinding of maize, the barking of dogs, the soft lullabies sung to children. The ceremony ended not with a burst of finality, but with a gentle return to continuity. For Pakal, seated within the temple's quiet chambers, the moment was one of reflection. He had lived through decades of struggle, rebuilding, and persistence. Yet this day reminded him that his legacy was not only in victories or conflicts, but in ensuring that life itself continued its rhythms, rituals observed, temples raised, names remembered. The temple of the inscriptions would endure beyond him, carrying his story in calm glyphs and silent stones, awaiting the eyes of future generations who might one day stand in wonder at what was built with such patience. And so, the dedication of the temple was not a climax, not a moment of noise and excitement, but a slow unfolding, a layering of repetition, a meditation in stone and sound. It was history written in incense smoke and stone walls, history that whispered rather than shouted, history that lulled the city into the reassurance of continuity. When you think of the Maya, one of the first mysteries that rises is their calendar, the intricate system of days and cycles that guided their lives. It was not just a way to mark time. It was a map of existence itself, an interlocking structure of repeating rhythms that stretched across centuries. To imagine it is to step into a world where time was not linear, not a straight path from beginning to end, but a series of spirals and cycles, each turning back upon itself, each folding into the next dot. For the Maya, time was sacred. They did not measure it only to know when to plant maize or when to prepare for harvest, though these were important. They measured it to align human life with cosmic order. Every day had a name, every day had a number, and every combination of number and name carried meaning, as though each sunrise arrived with a quiet message from the universe. There was the a 260-day cycle, built from the weaving together of 13 numbers and 20-day names. Imagine the slow turning of two gears, one with 13 teeth, another with 20. As they rotated, new pairings emerged, each marking a distinct day, each with its own significance. Priests, called daykeepers, studied these combinations. They listened to the subtle rhythm of the numbers, interpreting their meaning for farmers, rulers, and families alike. The Tzolk'in was not just a calendar. It was a voice, a rhythm that echoed through the everyday. Alongside it was the Hob, a solar calendar of 365 days, 18 months of 20 days each, followed by a small cycle of 5 extra days. These 5 days, known as the Wayeb, were considered dangerous, unstable, days when the boundaries between order and chaos thinned. And so, people moved carefully during that time, lighting incense, avoiding unnecessary risks, waiting for the stability of the new year to begin again. When the Tzolk'in and the Hob combined, they formed what we now call the calendar round, a repeating cycle of 18,980 days, roughly 52 solar years. To live through one complete calendar round was to return, after half a century, to the exact same combination of Tzolk'in and Hob. Few lived long enough to see it more than once, but the pattern was there, reminding everyone that time was not endless progression but rotation, recurrence, a wheel turning again and again. And yet, the Maya reached beyond these cycles. They counted even larger spans of time with the long count, a system that measured not decades but thousands of years. The long count stretched backward and forward, mapping eras that dwarfed individual lives, that reached into deep history and into futures unimaginable. For the Maya, a person's life was but a few beats in a rhythm that extended across the cosmos. It is here, in these grand scales, that mystery lingers. How did the Maya, without telescopes, without modern instruments, calculate the movements of Venus with such precision? How did they align their temples so carefully with solstices and equinoxes, with the rising of the sun and the paths of stars? To walk through their ruins today is to feel the quiet weight of those alignments. In Chichen Itza, The pyramid of El Castillo casts a serpent-shaped shadow only at the equinox. In Palenque, light enters chambers in specific patterns on significant days. These were not accidents. They were results of observation repeated, night after night, year after year, generation after generation. Imagine a Maya priest standing beneath the night sky. He looks upward, not in haste, but in patience. He notes where Venus rises, how the moon shifts, how the sun's position changes against the horizon. Each night adds another layer to memory. Each dawn confirms or adjusts the rhythm. Over time, these observations became a vast, accumulated knowledge. No single person could hold it all. It was handed down, shared, inscribed in glyphs, carved in stone, woven into the very fabric of their temples. The mystery is not that they observed. Anyone can watch the stars. The mystery is that they did it with such discipline, such consistency, that they built a system of time that still astonishes us today. The cycles of their calendar do not simply measure days. They reveal an understanding of patterns far greater than any one lifetime. The modern world became fascinated with this calendar. In the years leading up to 2012, when some believed that the Maya had predicted the end of the world. But the truth is more subtle, more calming. The Maya did not foresee an end. They saw transitions. One cycle closes, another begins. Just as night ends with dawn, just as harvest follows planting, so to do the great cycles of the long count roll onward. 2012 was not an ending, but a turning of the wheel, a movement into a new rhythm. For the Maya, that was natural, expected, reassuring. There is something deeply soothing in this perspective. To live in a world where every day has meaning, where every cycle repeats, where endings are never final but always gateways to beginnings. This is a worldview that eases the anxiety of time. The Maya calendar whispers, time is not rushing away from you. It is returning, spiraling, folding back upon itself. You are always within the pattern, always part of the rhythm. The archaeologists who study these calendars often speak of their awe at the precision. Glyphs on steely record dates with such clarity that we can pinpoint events from over 1,000 years ago. A single monument might tell us not only the day of a king's birth, but the position of Venus on that day, the alignment of the moon, the turn of the solar cycle. Imagine the patience behind that knowledge, the generations of observation required to create it. Imagine the quiet dedication of countless priests, night after night, staring at the same stars, repeating the same notes, passing their knowledge onward. Today, when you hold a calendar in your hand, it is flat, linear, a grid of squares leading forward. But the Maya saw more than grids. They saw spirals, interwoven wheels, cycles that nested within cycles. Their time was alive, moving, breathing. It could be counted, yes, but also interpreted, listened to, felt. To walk in their world was to live within a constant rhythm of repetition, days rising, days falling, days repeating their combinations again after long intervals. Even now, when you think of their calendar, you may feel a sense of its calm power. It is not a system designed to rush you forward, to remind you of deadlines or endings. It is a system that asks you to notice repetition, to accept the cycles, to breathe with the rhythm of the cosmos. The mystery is not only in how they built it, but in how it feels. Slow, patient, endlessly turning. And so, the Maya calendar remains one of history's great enigmas. Not because it is incomprehensible, but because it is so vast, so carefully constructed, that to truly grasp it requires letting go of haste, of urgency, and sinking into the rhythm of cycles that stretch across centuries. It is a mystery that soothes rather than unsettles, a reminder that time itself is not a rushing river, but a great wheel, turning again and again, carrying all lives within its steady motion. Imagine, for a moment, that you are walking alone along a narrow path that threads through the forest. The light above is soft and filtered, falling in a slow, trembling pattern through overlapping leaves. Your steps are careful and unhurried. The ground is a woven carpet of ancient detritus fallen fronds, powdered limestone, the faint scattering of pottery shards half swallowed by soil. Even before you reach the ruins, the forest has prepared you, your senses tuned to smaller things, to textures and to the patient hush of nature moving at its own pace. Ahead, between trunks thick with vines, stones appear first as small, moss-mottled shapes, then as a low wall, and at last as the weathered face of a building where human hands once labored purposefully. You pause. The stones are not dramatic. They are steady. They rise from the earth, not in a sudden proclamation, but in a slow, patient chorus, layer upon layer, each course a memory of a worker's measured day. The temple's silhouette is softened by lichen, its stairs softened by roots. But despite the forest's gentle reclaiming, the structure keeps its intent, an ordered space where humans once arranged themselves beneath sky and ritual. You run your fingers, very lightly, over a carved surface. The glyphs there are low and worn, edges rounded by time, but they are still legible to the careful eye. Feel the cool of the stone under your palm, the faint ridges where chisels scraped, the grooves that once caught paint. Imagine the original surface, bright with pigments reds and blues that glowed like embers, or the deep washed blue made from clay and plant resin. Those colors have faded, yet the stones still remember them, as if color had left a faint echo inside the limestone itself. A name rises in your mind, not to be shouted but to be thought. An elder, perhaps, named Balamwan, who walked these stairways when they were new. Picture him, slow steps, a careful gait, hands used to tying ropes and smoothing plaster. He would have felt the vibration of steady chiseling in his bones, the same sound repeated until it became a kind of song. You can almost hear it now, the steady, soft tap of stone meeting tool, the hush of dirt swept aside, the low voices marking measurements. All small sounds, one after another, repeating until a wall rose and a doorway took meaning. The architecture itself speaks in patient sentences. Stairways lead upward in calm ascent, each tread a small stage for the feet of worshippers and the slow procession of offerings. Doorways open into shadowed rooms, whose coolness still holds the memory of early morning ritual. Bowls of maize placed on altars, the faint curl of incense smoke, the hush of a chant repeated until its cadence became a thread-binding city and sky. Inside, carved benches show signs of many bodies sitting in silence. Low bas-reliefs suggest stories told in picture serpents curling. Maize stalks rising, celestial beings depicted with folded gestures. Each motif is a small, repeated phrase in a language of stone. Walk slowly around the plaza. Notice how the layout arranges movement. Plazas as breathing spaces, ball courts as long, low lungs where a game pulled at both athleticism and ritual meaning. Causeways sack-be brunning like pale ribbons across the ground, connecting this place to another. Imagine these white paths as guides for slow travel. Worn by sandals and bare feet, their surface reflecting light the way the skin of water does. They led people in measured procession from one house to another, from one temple to the next, a choreography of everyday devotion. Close your eyes for a moment and listen. The forest offers a backdrop, distant water dripping from cave mouths, a wind lifting a small rain of leaves, the rustle of a lizard sliding across warm stone. If you let your attention soften, other sounds come through as imagined memory, the low murmur of a community, the measured beat of drums, the soft call of a ceremonial horn. These are not loud or insistent. They fold into the environment like slow waves, making their presence felt more by rhythm than by volume. Archaeology has a slow, attentive patience not unlike the people who stood here centuries ago. Specialists walk with brushes and small tools, removing soil with gestures as quiet as the turning of pages. They find the modest things first, a pot rim, a bead of jade half hidden in dust, a scrap of painted stucco with a faded curve of blue. Each fragment is a syllable. Gathered together, they begin to form phrases, patterns of trade, hints of ceremony, the outline of daily life. A shard of pottery tells you the shape of a bowl. A charred maize kernel suggests what someone ate for breakfast on an ordinary day. A carved glyph with a date placed within it ties a moment in the city to the slow motion of the stars. There is a gentle puzzle here. The stones narrate, but they do so with ellipses. A line stops where paint once continued. An image is half weathered. A stairway leads to a chamber whose roof has collapsed. The absence is part of the text, too. You sense loss, yes, but also continuity. The current world is layered upon the old. Birds nesting where banners once hung. Vines writing green script over plaster. Children of the modern villagers still passing offerings at the edges of excavations. These gestures show that the sacred has adapted, but did not vanish, simply evolved, folded into new routines. Notice the careful alignments. The temple's axis is not random. It attunes to solar motion. On a particular morning, the rising sun pours light into a chamber and illuminates a carved face with startling clarity. On an equinox, shadow plays along the steps to make a form that looks a little like a serpent sliding down stone. Each of these moments is a small, repeated miracle and observation that required watching the horizon often enough to predict when light would fall just so. The ancients learned to measure subtle shifts in dawn's edge, to note where the moon rose against a distant copal tree, to watch Venus as it traced its slow path. These are acts of prolonged attention, night after night, year after year. The lives that moved through these spaces were not all priests and nobles. Builders and potters, mothers and children, traders and travelers, age, left traces. A patch of plaster may show where a child once carved a line in boredom. A footprint in a hardened clay floor might belong to a young woman hurrying to the market. The human scale of the ruins comforts as much as its small pains. People who loved worried about seed stores, who mended broken bowls, who hummed lullabies into the night. This is the pulse that underpins the impressive architecture. Steady, ordinary, humane. If you take a small stone from the ground, careful, gentle and hold it, you can feel the coolness that seems to keep time a little slower inside. The stone has held heat and shade, rain and dry seasons. It has listened to footfalls and to the measured words of ritual. That listening is what gives the ruins their depth. They are not inert. They are repositories of long attention, humble and patient. Now think of the modern hands that touch these stones. Some are descendants, their grandparents, grandsons, and daughters, who still offer small bowls of maize at the temple edge. Others are careful excavators, cataloguing, measuring, speaking softly as if to not disturb the sleeping city. They all move with the same deference, small, repetitive acts that honor the past without attempting to remake it. The balance between digging and leaving, between exposing and protecting, is carried out with the same slow consideration that shaped the monuments in the first place. As a day in your mind winds down, picture the ruins at dusk. The light moves slowly, shadows lengthen, and the stones seem to inhale the soft coolness. The forest soundscape swells, the frogs calling in low choruses, insects taking over the daytime choir. Torches, if any are lit, cast gentle, wavering light, and the temple's carved faces mellow into quiet silhouettes. The world is not silent, but it is hushed. The activity you imagine is not dramatic, but it is purposeful and constant. Let the steady, careful rhythm of the stones settle into your own breathing. Inhale as if you are taking in the cool limestone air. Exhale as if you are releasing a plume of old incense smoke. Each inhalation and exhalation matches the slow pulse of work and worship that shaped this place. The ruins are not a problem to be solved in one single, bright moment. They are a long, patient conversation between human effort and natural time, one that continues, soft continuing motions around you. Stay here for a few more breaths. Feel the steadiness that comes from repeated acts, the laying of a single stone, the carving of a single line, the sweep of a broom across a plaza. Each small motion, done again and again, builds the architecture of meaning. The temple keeps its quiet vigil, the forest keeps its patient watch, and you are gently folded into that long, slow rhythm. When you are ready, let the image dissolve like smoke upward, stone, leaf, and shadow blending into one calm picture, and allow that calm to follow you into rest. In the thin light before dawn, the village breathes with careful slowness. The thatched roofs glisten faintly with dew. A soft fog clings low to the ground like a remembered thing. Sounds are small and patient. A distant frog, the scrape of a vanner's foot on a path, the whisper of someone smoothing a mat. The day does not rush here. It unfolds in a long, even exhalation, and every person who lives within this pattern learns, over years, to move with it. At the heart of that measured life is a way of telling time that feels more like listening than like measurement. The calendars here are not lists of appointments. They are living devices that teach you when to act and when to wait. There is the solar circuit that orders planting and harvest, the sacred wheel that names days with tones and numbers, and the larger counts that stretch generations into a single, patient arc. For those who live by them, the calendars are a kind of grammar for daily living, soft rules that make ordinary tasks fall into place. Imagine an elder named Acabel, a daykeeper whose hair is the color of old maize. He moves slowly through the village, carrying a folded strip of bark paper marked with glyphs. His hands know these marks not only by sight but by the feel of the lines, as if the carved strokes contained the rhythm of seasons. When he sits before the market or the plaza, people gather without urgency. A farmer will lean on a digging stick and listen. A weaver pauses with a shuttle in her hand. Even the children, still learning to imitate chores, quiet themselves, catching the cadence of his voice. He speaks in low phrases, each one measured and repeated. Tomorrow is for planting. Tomorrow is for mending. Tomorrow is for offering. The words are instructions and lullabies at once. The days Tasks aligned gently to those instructions. If a seed is to be sown, it is placed in the soil on a morning marked as auspicious. The farmer who plants on that day does so with a different kind of attention, pressing the seed in, covering it with the same small pat of earth, smoothing the soil as though whispering to the plant. This is not ritual for its own sake. It is a way of joining action to time. Likewise, a weaver might choose a certain day to begin a pattern meant to bring good fortune, pulling thread in a slow, repeated cadence that matches the larger circles of sacred time. Ceremonies are quiet assemblies rather than spectacles. On an ordinary festival day, women braid small bundles of herbs, men prepare bowls of maize, and children form a loose procession behind elders who carry the smoke of copal. The smoke curls upward in steady columns, scenting hair and fabric and air. Drums beat in slow, regular pulses 1, 2, 3. Stroke a soft footfall measured against a calendar. Voices chant short phrases, repeated until the chant itself becomes a fabric, and then the people go on with their day. The ceremony completes and the village resumes its steady patterns. The ritual is a stitch that holds time's cloth together rather than an interruption of it. This way of thinking about time shapes how the community manages scarcity and abundance. The year's wet months are anticipated and prepared for. Seed stores are counted with the kind of exactness that calms worry. When rains delay, families make small adjustments, slightly smaller portions, a borrowed bag of beans from a neighbor, the careful mending of a sack instead of replacement. These adjustments are not dramatic decisions. They are a series of small acts, repeated and shared, that collectively steady life. The calendars provide a map to these acts. They remind people when to ration, when to save, and when it is safest to move goods along trade paths. The daykeeper's authority is gentle. He does not command with force. He offers a tone, a suggestion, a soft alignment. A trader arriving from a neighboring valley will ask when markets are best held. The elder will point to a day whose small constellation of signs favors exchange. Then, on that chosen morning, traders come with their bundles dyes, ground obsidian, strings of shell, woven cloth, and commerce itself fits into the rhythm. Haggling is low-voiced and practical. Barter becomes another repetition in a fabric of exchange that has its own regularity. Goods move steadily along the same worn tracks that people have walked for generations, and each exchange reaffirms a small economy of reliance. Children grow up in this measured world, learning through imitation and repetition. They carry small water gourds, sweeping the grain husks, imitating the grinding motion with their own tiny They learn to link a type of day with a type of action. This morning is for spinning, that morning for weeding, the next for visiting an elder. Their minds collect patterns. Skill becomes habit, and habit becomes a quiet comfort. The training is slow, unshowy, like the slow beat of drums, lowering the heart into steadiness. At night, the celestial patterns take over the village's notice. The stars are not distant abstractions, but a slow script read nightly by people between chores. The bright path of the Milky Way is a river of memory. The rising of Venus, when it appears as morning star or evening fire, is a signal of shifts in the seasons and in matters of state. The moon's phases are watched with the calm attention of those who plant and who keep watch. These nightly observations are not hurried glances, but long practicing for hours with others. Eyes tracing the arc of light, voices low and repetitive, noting the small differences that matter. Astronomy here is lived patience. There is also comfort in the repetition of domestic works. The scraping of a matete, the pull of warp threads, the steady thump of a mortar awl. These sounds form a domestic meter that soothes rather than agitates. Work is not eliminated by the calendar. It is given shape by it. In that shaping, chores become lullabies. To listen is to let the metrical sounds slow one's breathing. The relentless sameness of tasks is, paradoxically, a reassurance. The same actions tomorrow will offer the same small coping structures, the same neighborly exchanges, the same possibility of harvest. The memory of elders and the recorded marks on stones and bark paper bind generations with gentle redundancy. A carved date on a stela is a repeated point on a wheel. A lineage of rulers and a sequence of reigns are set beside one another like beads on a string. Young parents will tell a child, in quiet evening tones, how their grandparents observed a certain alignment and how it saved a season. These stories are not shoutings of triumph, but careful narratives, repeated often enough to become a cultural habit of expectation and preparation. Even grief is folded into the wheel. When a death occurs, rites are paced to the calendar. Names are spoken on dates that connect the living with the deceased, ensuring that memory is not a sudden burst of sorrow but a long practice, repeated. Offerings, the slow cleaning of a house, scheduled remembrances acts that soften loss by continual small attentions. The practice punishes neither speed nor stagnation. It simply channels feeling into recurring gestures that support daily life. If you imagine the village as a clock, it is not a ticking mechanical heart but a breathing organism. Its measures are not strict deadlines but recurring invitations. The calendar does not force, it invites. It suggests when to begin and when to pause, when to mend and when to celebrate. And in accepting those suggestions, people find a particular kind of rest on ease that comes from folding one's tasks into a broader, reassuring flow. Now picture the wet season's first rains. The air turns sweet and heavy. The soil drinks and answers with sprouting shoots. The villagers move in slightly quicker sequences for a time-preparing storage, adjusting pathways, harvesting what must be taken in before storms. Then the rhythm settles again into its long pace. When drought tightens the year, the same cycles do not fail. They frame the response, sharing, careful rationing, neighborly rotations of labor. Each difficult moment is met with a series of repeated small acts that amount to resilience. Let the quiet repetition of these images become a lullaby for yourself. Think of the elder Acable S measured phrases, the way farmers press seeds into soil on a specific morning, the soft drumbeat of offerings, the slow turning of the stars above. Breathe with that rhythm. Inhale as a drum strikes. Exhale as the smoke of copal drifts upward. Allow the calendar's slow circling to carry your thoughts into a soft, steady rest. And feel the village's long habit of attention settle you gently into sleep. Walk with me, slowly, toward the plaza at the center of the old town. The air here is soft and steady, warmed by sun and shaded by high leaves. Underfoot, the packed earth is familiar and forgiving. Your steps make only small, muted sounds. Ahead, tall stones rise steely in carved panels. Walls that once wore bright paint and now keep the memory of pigments in quiet echoes. The stones are patient. They do not shout. They hold information the way a pond holds, leaked reflective, still and deep. Pause a moment before the nearest monument. Let your eyes settle on it. The carved figures are weathered but present, a ruler in profile. A headdress rendered like a small landscape, hands that once held objects now gone. Between the images run lines of glyphs, careful little blocks of shape and dot and curl, ordered into a column of meaning. The glyphs do not race at you. They sit quietly, each one a small sign with a slow function. Imagine a person long ago, bending close to this very face, tracing each sign with a practiced finger and saying its sound aloud. That voice was slow and measured, and the stone remembers the cadence of the utterance as much as the pattern of the cut. These carved stones were not placed for ornament alone. They were public memory books in 3 dimensions, meant to endure. A stela announces a name and a date as plainly as a ledger book notes a harvest. It marks a birth, a marriage, an offering, a conquest. Yet the message is not simply factual. It is placed within the larger weave of meaning. A date will be given and then given again, linked to the position of the sun or to the arrival of Venus, so that the event's significance is anchored to the sky. The effect is stabilizing. The city's story is not a string of anecdotes, but a pattern woven into the cosmos. Think of the carvers who made these texts. Their work was slow and repetitive. A chisel tap-tap, tap, tap-tapped, then the pause to check the line. Over days the image formed, face, headdress, hands. Over months the glyphs were laid out with care. Sometimes a painter followed, applying red from hematite or blue from indigo mixed with clay. The pigments, once brilliant, have faded, but the stone keeps a whisper of the original color, a faint blue in a carved groove, the shadow of red beneath flaked surface. The labor that set them in place was not an outburst, but a long, repeated motion. And in that repetition, the carver and the ruler and the ritual all found their place. Nearby, a frieze may show a procession. Figures move in careful rows. Musicians, dancers, people bearing offerings. Look at their feet. Each stride is the same small step, repeated across the band as if the frieze itself is teaching how to walk in ritual. The procession in stone is a manual of behavior, how to hold an offering, how to walk with a drum, how to carry a bowl to a shrine. Children who grew up beside these walls learned by imitation. They watched adults follow such motions, listened to elders repeat old phrases, and slowly their bodies took on the rhythm. The carved procession thus becomes a living lesson, folding movement into memory. Stone is not only text, it is also place. Some stones mark boundaries lines between neighborhoods, markers of a road, points where a causeway meets a plaza. In these positions they do practical work. They guide bodies along a route, point to a temple, hold a name for a lineage. A child passing with a small basket learns these markers like letters in an alphabet. First, the path to the market, then the step that leads to the well, then the block where their aunt's house stands. The stones thus structure daily life, making movement legible, making it safe to expect that certain actions will happen in particular places and at particular times. There are also hidden text glyphs, tucked away in recesses, inscriptions placed on stair risers, tiny marks on lint. These are quiet places of recording, ones that reward slow attention. A priest or a scribe might walk these spaces with a candle, reading aloud as their finger traced the signs. The cadence of reading, repeated over years, anchored memory in the body as well as in the stone. The act of reading out loud made private knowledge public. The public repeating of lines made stories communal. Memory thus became a practiced rhythm shared by many voices. When archaeologists arrive in our time, They approach these stones with that same patient rhythm. Brushes are used in small sweeps. Fragments are catalogued and wrapped. Photographs are taken carefully to preserve the light at a certain angle. The work is methodical because the record is fragile. A single scrape too eager can remove the only trace of a painted line. Specialists measure, note, and cross-reference. A glyph here with a painted emblem there. A buried offering beneath a floor that matches the date on a Each correlation is like a small bridge across time, joining one observation to another, slowly building a narrative out of fragments. But the stones do not give everything away. There are gaps, weathered faces, lost passages. These absences are part of the stone's language. A missing glyph is a silence that invites imagination. It is a pause in a sentence that lets you feel the cadence more than it forces you to resolve a meaning. Sometimes what is not carved is as eloquent as what is. A wall stripped of pigment tells us about fire or abandonment. A stair worn thin in one place tells us where feet lingered most, perhaps near an altar or near a market stall. The quiet is instructive. It asks for slow comprehension rather than quick conclusions. Often the best way to read the stones is to listen to how modern villagers relate to them. You might see an old woman carrying a small offering maze, and flowers who pauses at the base of a stilla and touches it with a reverent palm. She may not speak the ancient glyphs, but she knows stories told by her grandmother. This was the year when rains returned. This was the season when a certain ancestor made an oath. Her touch is an echo of the original intention. It is a living continuity. The stones thus connect not only to an ancient elite, but to daily people who keep memory alive in quieter, domestic ways. The murals that remain on walls complement carved stones. Their painted scenes catch small domestic details that stone cannot show with the same immediacy: the shape of a bowl, the particular design of a textile, the faces of musicians playing a small flute. Even in fragments, murals convey the texture of ordinary life. Children at play, merchants arranging goods, cooks tending coals. These painted scenes remind us that the carved monuments were part of a fuller environment where ceremony and everyday life coexisted. Each painted stroke was a deliberate repetition of detail, a small act of making that fixed a moment in time through pigment and gesture. And finally, consider how the stones frame silence. They create spaces where sound changes, plazas echo differently beneath carved faces. Small chambers hold voice in a way that makes whispers grow longer. People knew these acoustic properties. A priest might position himself so that a chant would swell in a particular corner, making the words feel larger and holding the assembly's attention. The architecture and the carved surfaces shaped not only sight but also sound. And in that shaping, the community's rituals were given an oral rhythm that matched the visual one. Let your thoughts slow to match the stone's rhythm. Picture the carver tapping, the painter layering reds and blues, the procession walking past a raised stela, the old woman pressing a palm to cool limestone. Inhale as if you are taking in the scent of old pigment and warmed stone. Exhale with the patience of someone who knows that meaning accumulates slowly, one careful gesture at a time. The stones are steady, and the silence they create is kind. They ask only that you linger, listen, and let the long memory of carved time ease you into calm. Step with me now away from the market, the workshop, and the crowded plaza. The air shifts as you pass under a broad archway leading into the quieter precincts of the city. Here, the sounds of haggling, hammering, and laughter fade into a measured hush. Ahead rises the residence of the ruling family, the noble house that presided over ceremony and decision. Its walls stand higher than those of the common dwellings, their plaster smoother, their corners straighter. Even before entering, you sense a difference of rhythm. Life here moves at a slower, more deliberate pace. The entryway opens onto a courtyard paved with carefully fitted stones. In the center rests a basin of still water, its surface broken only by the occasional drifting leaf. Around the courtyard, rooms branch outwards, sleeping chambers, and halls where guests were once received. The plaster is faintly painted, patches of red and ochre hinting at murals now mostly lost. Step closer and you may trace faint outlines. A bird with outstretched wings, a ruler holding a staff, curling designs of vines and blossoms. These decorations were not hurried additions. They were meant to remind anyone who entered that this household was part of a lineage, part of a story larger than one life. Imagine now the nobles moving within these rooms. Their clothing is different from the rough cotton of the farmers. A lord's tunic is woven more finely, threads dyed in shades that required rare plants and careful work. Patterns run along the hem's geometric lines or stylized animals that signal identity and rank. A lady of the household might wear long skirts of soft fabric, her hair bound with a band threaded with jade beads. Such adornments are not gaudy. They are quiet statements of belonging to a smaller, more privileged circle. Servants move quietly in the background. One carries a bowl of cacao drink, frothy and spiced with chili. Another brings woven mats to place on the floor for guests. Their footsteps are hushed against the smooth plaster, and their motions are practiced, bowing slightly, offering with both hands, retreating without turning their backs. The service is part of the rhythm of the house, as rehearsed as a ritual. The nobles do not prepare their own meals or grind their own maize. Others take on those labors. Their time is reserved for matters of governance, ritual, and display. Consider a noble's morning, while a farmer rose before dawn to begin grinding maize. A noble might wake later to the sound of musicians playing soft notes on flutes in the courtyard. Attendants bring water for washing, scented with crushed leaves. Clothing is laid out, embroidered, carefully folded. A light meal follows, perhaps maize cakes flavored with honey, or a drink of cacao mixed with vanilla. These foods, available in smaller quantities to commoners, are staples here, reminders of wealth and access. Even the act of eating is more measured, less hurried, as though time itself bends differently within these walls. After the meal, business begins. Nobles sit on low benches in audience halls where scribes unroll long strips of bark paper covered in glyphs. Reports are given, the condition of fields, the tribute collected from outlying villagers, the preparations for an upcoming festival. The noble listens, asks questions, gives instructions. Every word is noted, every gesture recorded in memory by those present. The process is not rushed. Decisions are delivered in calm tones, accompanied by ritual phrases meant to align them with tradition. Governance is as much performance as it is practicality, and the performance requires patience. Walk further into the residence and you find storerooms stacked with goods. Here are painted vessels, their surfaces decorated with scenes of animals and mythic beings. There are bundles of cotton, sacks of cacao beans, carved wooden staffs, and jewelry wrapped in cloth. These are not mere possessions. They are symbols of wealth and power, ready to be displayed or given as gifts to strengthen alliances. Each item carries stories of trade. a feather plucked from a tropical bird, a shell brought from a distant coast, a jade bead carved with infinite care. The storerooms hum with the silent presence of distant landscapes gathered under one roof. Ritual is woven into daily life here. At intervals, the household gathers in the courtyard for offerings. A small fire is lit, and resin is sprinkled onto the flames, sending sweet smoke into the air. The noble family bows their heads, murmurs phrases of thanks, and watches as the smoke curls upward. Servants place flowers and food at the base of an altar, each motion deliberate, repeated countless times across generations. Ritual does not interrupt daily life. It frames it, slows it, and turns each day into part of an unbroken chain stretching backward and forward through time. In the afternoons, leisure holds sway. A noble may sit in a shaded room listening to musicians play flutes and drums, or poets recite verses filled with metaphors of rain and maize. Children of the house play nearby, not with rough toys carved hastily from wood, but with painted figurines or balls crafted of rubber. Their laughter is softer, their games supervised by tutors who also teach them glyphs, numbers, and the stories of ancestors. Education is a privilege here, and learning is not hurried. Glyphs are repeated slowly, drawn carefully with brushes, recited until the rhythm of language becomes second nature. The contrast to the outer city is striking. While commoners spend hours under the sun in fields or workshops, the nobles spend their hours in shaded courtyards, discussing matters, overseeing rituals, and being entertained. This is not to say their lives are entirely free of duty. The weight of responsibility is real. They must maintain alliances, judge disputes, sponsor ceremonies, and ensure the gods remain honored. But the texture of their duty is different, couched in formality, buffered by layers of attendance, carried out in spaces where sound is soft and air is cool. As evening falls, the household gathers again. Torches are lit along the courtyard walls, casting golden light across painted plaster. The noble family reclines on mats, while attendants bring platters of food, roasted turkey, stews of beans and squash, sauces flavored with chili and herbs. Bowls of cacao drink are served, foamed to perfection. The meal is accompanied by conversations low, deliberate, filled with recollections of ancestors and retellings of myths. Nothing is hurried. Each bite, each phrase is part of a carefully maintained rhythm of refinement. Finally, night deepens. Musicians play gentle tunes, and incense burns low. The nobles retire to their chambers where soft mats await. Attendants close the doors, and the residence falls into stillness. Outside, in the wider city, fires still glow in common households, and laughter echoes faintly from plazas. But here, within the noble house, silence reigns. The slow beat of elite life continues, measured, deliberate, and wrapped in ritual. Let yourself rest in this silence. Feel the difference of rhythm, the slower pace, the carefully tended calm. The noble house, with its painted walls, its quiet courtyards, and its steady ceremonies, becomes a cradle of repetition, guiding even your breath into steadiness. The stones stand high, the air is cool, and time drifts gently, carrying you toward rest. The noble household was not only a private refuge of shaded courtyards and measured conversations, it was also a stage one upon which prestige, ritual, and the careful weaving of alliances were constantly performed. If the day of a farmer was defined by the rising and setting of the sun over fields, the day of a noble was marked by gatherings, ceremonies, and the ceaseless rhythm of public expectation. within these walls. Life was not only lived but displayed, repeated, and shaped to fit into patterns that had endured for generations. Picture now a ceremonial feast, prepared not hastily but with weeks of planning. Messengers have been sent to neighboring settlements, inviting allied families, distant cousins, and local dignitaries. Tribute has arrived: baskets of maize, bundles of cotton, gourds of honey, and bundles of cacao beans. Each item has been carried across paths and rivers, stacked carefully in storerooms until the proper day. The feast is not merely about eating. It is about presence, about being seen, about reinforcing ties through the careful exchange of food and drink. The courtyard is transformed for the occasion. Mats are laid in long rows. Torches are placed along the walls, their light flickering in rhythmic patterns across painted surfaces. Attendants scatter fresh flowers, bright marigolds, and fragrant blossoms, so that the air carries not only the warmth of fire, but also the sweetness of petals. Musicians gather at the edges, ready with drums and flutes to provide the steady pulse of sound that will carry the evening forward. The entire space becomes a stage of sound, light, and movement, yet all of it unfolds at a measured, almost dreamlike pace. Guests arrive in their finest clothing. Tunics are embroidered with thread dyed in rare colors. Cloaks shimmer with feathers arranged in careful patterns. Necklaces of jade, shells, or carved bone rest against the chest. Each detail is deliberate, each adornment a sign not of individual vanity, but of lineage, wealth, and connection. Greetings are exchanged not quickly but slowly, with formal phrases repeated and hands extended in ritualized gestures. To witness these greetings is to witness the rhythm of tradition itself, unhurried and deliberate. As the feast begins, attendants move steadily, bringing bowls of food to the mats. Stews of beans and squash, roasted meats, tamales wrapped in leaves, sauces rich with chili and herbsol are placed in front of the guests. The air grows thick with the scents of maize, smoke, and spice. Bowls of cacao are passed along, each one frothed with care until the surface shimmers with bubbles. Guests take their time, sipping slowly, speaking in low voices that blend with the music. Nothing is rushed. Every act of eating, every sip, is part of a performance of abundance. Yet beneath the feasting lies quiet strategy. The nobles hosting the gathering watch carefully, who sits where, who speaks to whom, who lingers and who withdraws. Alliances are reinforced not only with words, but with gestures and extra portion of food. A gift of a finely painted vessel, a cloak draped over the shoulders of a guest. These acts are not dramatic. They are subtle, steady, part of a larger fabric of reciprocity. The noble family must constantly weave and reweave this fabric, ensuring that ties remain strong, obligations clear, and loyalty preserved. Ritual often accompanies the feast. At intervals, the music stills, and the household's priest steps forward. He holds incense and sprinkles resin onto a flame, sending sweet smoke curling upward. The guests bow their heads, the host family lowers their eyes, and silence falls. Prayers are murmured, not hurried, not loud, but in tones so soft that they seem to echo inside the heart rather than the ear. Offerings are made, flowers placed on altars, food left for unseen spirits, words spoken to ancestors who linger in memory. The feast is not only for the living, it is also for the dead, and for the gods whose favor sustains all. After the offerings, music returns. Drums beat softly, flutes sing in high notes that drift like wind through trees. Dancers step into the courtyard, their movements slow, repetitive, patterned to echo stories of creation and renewal. Their costumes are adorned with feathers and shells, so that with each step, light glimmers and sound accompanies motion. The audience watches in stillness, not applauding, not interrupting. The dance is not entertainment in the modern sense. It is continuity, a retelling of the same stories performed countless times before, and countless times yet to come. Late into the night, the feast lingers. Some guests recline on mats, speaking of old events, recalling ancestors, or telling quiet tales of journeys. Children grow drowsy and lean against their mothers, while attendants continue to bring water, food, and blankets. The torches burn lower, the air grows cooler, yet the rhythm continues. One could drift into slumber here, lulled by the steady pulse of drums, the murmur of voices, the fragrance of flowers and smoke. The feast does not end with a sudden stop. It simply fades, like a tide withdrawing into the night. When guests depart, gifts are exchanged. A painted vessel, a bundle of cacao beans, a cloak of woven cotton each, handed with quiet words that bind both giver and receiver in a web of obligation. These gifts will be remembered, not for their material worth alone, but for the ties they symbolize. To receive is to promise. To give is to request. The noble household ensures that no guest departs without a token, and in so doing, ensures that no guest forgets the night or the family who hosted it in the days that follow. The memory of the feast lingers. Servants recount the guests they served, scribes record the names of attendees, and nobles discuss the outcomes, who showed loyalty, who remained distant, who might need further attention. The event may have appeared tranquil, measured, even uneventful, but beneath its calm surface, alliances were renewed, hierarchies affirmed, and power reinforced. The feast was not simply a gathering. It was a mechanism, a steady heartbeat of political life, and so, life within the noble class flowed not only in private courtyards, but also in these public rituals of food, drink, and smoke. They lived within cycles of repetition, preparation, ceremony, offering, and memory. Just as a farmer repeated the act of grinding maize each dawn, nobles repeated the acts of hosting, gifting, and remembering. Each cycle, whether of food or ritual, wove them more tightly into the fabric of their world. Let yourself rest now in the echo of these cycles. Picture the courtyard lit with torches, the slow rhythm of drums, the soft fragrance of flowers, the murmured prayers drifting upward like smoke. In this rhythm, steady and unhurried, you may find your own breath softening, your own thoughts settling, until you too drift into the gentle repetition of sleep. Within the noble house, the rhythms of daily life extended far beyond the private courtyards and feasting halls. Nobles were not merely people of leisure or ceremony. They stood at the intersection of the earthly and the divine, expected to act as guardians of balance. Their lives were woven into responsibilities that shaped not only their households, but the city itself, and, in a sense, the cosmos beyond. To imagine their world is to imagine a life lived under the steady gaze of tradition, expectation, and history itself. At the heart of this responsibility was governance. Each noble carried duties that stretched outward into the villages, the fields, and the tributary towns. Reports arrived regularly, the harvest measured in baskets of maize, the tribute counted in cacao beans and cotton cloth, the numbers of workers available for construction or ceremony. These reports were not hurriedly scanned or dismissed. They were read aloud by scribes, slowly, Carefully, as the nobles sat in silence, listening, absorbing each figure, decisions followed in measured tones, salications, instructions, approvals, each one carrying weight far beyond the walls of the house. The process of ruling was as ceremonial as it was practical. Nobles did not bark commands or rush through decrees. Instead, they spoke with deliberation, phrasing their words in ways that connected present actions to ancestral precedents. To govern was not simply to decide. It was to maintain continuity, to ensure that what had been done before would be echoed again. Each decision was framed not as innovation, but as repetition, as though the noble voice carried the memory of those who had ruled before. In this way, order was preserved, and authority made timeless. Beyond administration, the nobles bore a burden of ritual. It was believed that their position bound them directly to the gods. Offerings made by commoners in homes and markets were essential. But the offerings made by nobles were magnified, carried out with greater resources and greater visibility. At set intervals, nobles led ceremonies in plazas or temple precincts. Dressed in garments adorned with feathers, jade, and embroidery, they moved with solemn grace, carrying incense, scattering flowers, reciting prayers. Each gesture was performed not once, but again and again, across seasons and generations. These repetitions sustained belief that the balance of the world remained intact. Picture the nobles standing at the top of a platform, the plaza below filled with quiet onlookers. Smoke rises, drums beat slowly, flutes release soft notes that drift into the air. The noble raises a vessel, pours liquid upon the ground, or places food upon an altar. These are not dramatic spectacles. They are steady, deliberate motions that connect the human with the divine. For those watching, the act reassures, the cycle continues, the gods are honored, life remains in rhythm. For the noble, the act reinforces identity. Not just a person of wealth, but a bridge between earth and sky. Education played a central role in maintaining this order. Noble children were not raised in idleness, despite the comfort surrounding them. Tutors guided them through the learning of glyphs, numbers, songs, and ceremonial dances. They were taught how to sit in audience halls, how to phrase greetings, how to perform rituals with the correct cadence and gesture. Lessons were slow, repetitive, and unbroken by haste. A child repeated the same glyph again and again until the brushstrokes became natural. They listened to the same myth recited countless times until the story seemed to echo in their dreams. Through repetition, they were shaped into guardians of continuity. The nobles' lives, though cushioned by servants and wealth, were not entirely free from unease. Responsibility weighed heavily. A poor harvest, a drought, or a defeat in battle reflected not only on farmers and warriors, but also on the nobles who oversaw offerings and governance. When the rains failed, it was the noble family that faced whispers of displeased gods. When conflicts arose, it was the nobles who bore the burden of negotiation or defense. Thus, their privilege carried with it a quiet, persistent pressure, an expectation that they would maintain harmony in ways ordinary people could not. Consider the contrast once more. Outside the noble house, a farmer rose before dawn, bent over the grinding stone, and spent the day under the sun, hoping the soil would yield enough maize. Inside the noble house, a lord rose later, drank cacao, and spoke in audience halls. Yet both were bound by repetition. The farmer repeated the motions of planting, grinding, and weaving. The noble repeated the motions of listening, deciding, and offering. Though their lives diverged in comfort and setting, they converged in rhythm. Both followed cycles. Both lived within patterns older than themselves. Both carried forward the quiet weight of expectation. Even leisure held symbolic meaning. When nobles enjoyed music or listened to poets, they were not merely entertaining themselves. They were participating in the preservation of tradition. Songs told of creation, poems praised ancestors, dances mirrored myths. To recline on a mat while hearing these performances was not indulgence alone. It was reinforcement of cultural memory. Every note, every verse, every gesture reminded those present of their place within a wider cosmos. As evening descended, governance did not end. Nobles discussed matters with advisors, scribes, and priests. Decisions were framed for the next day. Preparations were made for ceremonies yet to come. The torches flickered in courtyards, smoke drifted from censers, and the calm of night settled over the house. Outside, the city continued with its own rhythms, farmers resting, artisans finishing tasks, children playing in dimly lit streets. Yet inside the noble household, the atmosphere remained measured, serene, deliberate. Responsibility lingered even as the household drifted toward rest, to imagine the life of a noble. Then is not only to imagine privilege, it is to imagine living within a frame of constant ceremony, expectation, and duty. It is to imagine moving always in patterns, repeating gestures that had been repeated countless times before. It is to imagine being at once elevated above others and bound more tightly to tradition than anyone else. Their wealth gave them comfort, but their role gave them weight. They lived not simply for themselves, but for the city, the gods, and the order of the world. And so, as night deepens, let yourself rest in the echoes of these rhythms. Picture the noble house lit by torches, the soft murmur of voices in audience halls, the slow cadence of ritual prayers. Picture the balance they strove to maintain, the cycles they carried forward, the weight they bore in silence. Just as their lives unfolded within patterns of repetition, let your own breaths settle into a rhythm, slow and steady. The world turns, the cycles continue, and in their calm repetition, you may find your own path toward rest. As we draw our journey to a close, let us pause for a moment, lingering in the soft stillness that follows long hours of walking, observing, and imagining. You have moved with the people of a Maya village, tracing the daily rhythms of their toil, their tasks, their quiet struggles beneath sun and sky. You have watched children learn the movements of ritual. Adults labor over grinding stones and woven mats. Families sustaining themselves on maize and beans, offering care and attention in measured, repeated gestures. You have felt, in your mind and body, the pulse of life dictated by necessity, the quiet discipline of daily survival, the endless repetition of actions that formed the texture of ordinary existence. From there, we move to the lives of those who bore responsibility beyond their own household, the scribes, the artisans, and the participants in ceremonies who marked time and memory, who engraved glyphs and painted murals so that stories could endure. You have imagined their deliberate hands, the slow rhythm of brush against plaster, chisel against stone, the careful cadence of reading aloud as lessons and memory intertwined. Each stroke, each repetition, was a quiet act of preservation, echoing across generations, linking past, present, and future. In that, there was common understanding that the world itself was held together by steady, measured effort. We then journeyed further into the quiet mysteries. Steely and carved panels, hidden inscriptions, tucked-in stairways, murals depicting musicians and children, the slow, deliberate construction of meaning through time. These stones and walls, though silent, spoke volumes. They asked for patient observation, slow thought, gentle attention. In their quiet endurance, they taught the value of repetition, of care, of observation without haste. The rhythm of human life, of learning, and of memory was echoed back to us, soft and continuous, like a slow river carrying the sun's reflection over smooth stones. Finally, we entered the world of the noble class, where rhythm took on new forms, ritual, ceremony, feasting, education, and governance. Here, privilege came with responsibility. Courtyards, halls, and altars became stages for repetition. Slow gestures, careful offerings, patterned movements that reinforced continuity, stability, and cosmic order. In these spaces, life was deliberate, every motion measured, every sound considered, every decision anchored in long-established precedent. Yet within this structure, there was comfort and calm, a measured pace that guided both body and mind. You have glimpsed the delicate balance between power and duty, between ceremony and care, between authority and stillness. Throughout our journey, there has been one thread connecting all lives, the rhythm of repetition, whether grinding maize at dawn, carving glyphs into stone, preparing ritual offerings, or orchestrating ceremonies in a noble courtyard. Each action unfolded in cycles. Each day repeated gestures, tasks, and rituals that gave structure to life. In repetition, there was stability. In stability, there was calm. And in calm, there was the quiet space to notice, to reflect, and finally, to rest. You have walked alongside these people, imagined their steps, and felt the slow cadence of time stretching across generations, tone now. As the day fades in your mind and the journey settles, let your own breath find this rhythm. Inhale slowly, as if drawing in the scent of warm earth, freshly crushed leaves, or the faint fragrance of incense drifting from a noble courtyard. Exhale, letting go of the tension in your body, releasing the effort of thinking, imagining, and observing. With each breath, you move closer to the gentle stillness that the villagers, scribes, carvers, and nobles all knew in their own way. Life continued around them, often challenging, often repetitive, always steady. And now, you too may let life continue quietly outside your mind, while your inner world drifts toward calm. Feel the gentle echo of the grinding stone, the soft brush of chisel against limestone, the low murmur of ceremonial voices, the slow sway of dancers' feet. Let these sounds, imagined but steady, guide you into a space where awareness softens, thoughts slow, and muscles release. You have walked through centuries of daily life, work, ritual, and governance. You have traced the small actions that shaped existence, learned to notice the rhythm of repetition, and observed how calm grows when one moves in harmony with cycles larger than oneself. And now, in this soft twilight of thought, let the quiet linger. Let the images of villages, courtyards, stones, and altars settle gently behind closed eyes. Let the rhythm of repetition, the steadiness of ancient lives, and the calm patience of those who came before wash over you. Your body is supported, your mind is slowing, and the world continues around you in quiet balance. You have observed, imagined, and reflected. The journey is complete, and it is time to rest. Good night.